Welcome to Leading with Curiosity. Command and control leadership is dead. We interview leaders, entrepreneurs, and executive coaches challenging old paradigms and fostering cutting-edge leadership. Here's your host, certified executive coach, Nate Leslie.
Hey, curious listeners. Nate Leslie here. Thanks for tuning into this episode. If you are curious about what it's like at the C-suite level, supports that can make all of the difference, what coaching is like at a really masterful level, I invite you to stick around for this episode with Kimberly Gerber. She's the founder of Excelerate, an executive development firm based in Irvine, California, with clients all over the country. Gosh, they've worked with over 100 companies, tens of thousands of coaching hours. We explore the impact of your worst behaviors that come out of you, that literally leak out of you under times of stress. We explore the blinders that come on when we're under stress. We also explore the beautiful value of candor, what it means to really be honest as a leader in the spirit of development, of culture, of preserving what is good in relationships and in organizations and in culture. Such a masterful coach who's been at it for over 20 years, which goes back to the starting days of executive coaching. I learned so much. I hope you do too. Enjoy the episode. Kimberly Gerber, welcome to Leading with Curiosity.
Oh, thanks, Nate. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm really excited to see where this conversation goes. I know I have a lot to learn, and I have some curiosities that we're going to explore that I think the listeners will enjoy. Let's start with how you came to be a certified executive coach leading an executive development firm.
It's a great question. And I would say not the traditional path. I had been an executive in corporate for 10 years. I took a COO job, and it was right kind of at the .com.bomb era. And when we were actually partnered with WorldCom, and so when some of that all started to kind of crumble, I started getting phone calls. And after a couple of those phone calls, I thought, I have a company here, right? People wanted to work with me, and I had always wanted to own my own firm. And so I started consulting. My background's in marketing, so I started marketing consulting. But my passion had become developing leaders. And so I knew at some point I needed to have my company become more focused on leadership development. And as the world would have it, a couple years in, I started getting calls from clients that I had completed consulting agreements with or engagements with. Mm-hmm. And I remember one of them so clearly saying, do you think that it would be okay if I just called you every couple of weeks? And because I just feel better when I'm talking to you, and I just want someone to sort through issues with and whatever. And she's like, and you can charge me. And I was like, okay, because that would be good. And so I started doing that. And what I found was most of my clients that I was consulting with ultimately wanted to continue in a coaching relationship. And after about a year, I was like, okay, this is micro consulting is what this is. Right. But I thought executive coaching was just becoming a thing then. And I thought, well, I really like this. This is a pivot for me to take the business in the direction I wanted it to go. And so in 2004, I got my coaching certification, and it really did help me refocus the organization and the company exactly where I wanted it to go. And so for the last, 20 years, Excelerate has been providing services. And for the last 18 years, we've really been focusing on coaching and executive development.
Wow. Now, for the audio listeners, they won't know you look very young to have been at coaching at its ground floor.
Well, thank you very much. Well preserved.
But you did mention the .com.bomb, I think you called it. So to put it in context, you're in Irvine, California, and 20 years. And it's amazing to think about that, 20 years ago, executive coaching was new, and you were using the words consulting firm, and then suddenly I felt it going towards I think this is going towards coaching, and literally people are asking for something of you, which is personal human connection every couple of weeks.
Right.
And it
You know,
transitioned. Yeah.
yes, and it's interesting because I remember standing in my kitchen at the time, and I remember thinking, if I had the perfect job, if I was going to do the thing that I wanted to do every day, what would it be? And I was fanciful. I wasn't, doing. It was just me, having fun, having fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I would talk to my friends and solve problems all day long. And it did not occur to me for many, many years, but that was a very vocal self conversation that I had that day. And that really ended up being what my career is. And my kids asked me today, like, Mom, if you could do whatever you wanted to do, what would it be? I'm like, exactly what I'm doing today.
Nice.
They're like, no, I'm serious. And I'm like, so am I.
Great. And for the listeners new to coaching, you chose some words there, solving problems, and maybe you could speak to the role of coach in executive leadership development of helping people solve their own.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the role of the coach in executive development is multi-pronged. It depends a lot on the client. One of the principal roles is to be a mirror to the individual. So a lot of times executives they're working with lots and lots of people, but it can be very isolating. The higher you are in leadership, the less feedback, the less candor, the less input you receive, particularly about yourself and your leadership. So one of the great gifts of executive coaching for people at that level is to have a mirror, to have someone who's willing to speak candidly to them about how they're showing up, where they can personally improve, how they might better focus, better prioritize, better serve their stakeholders. So I think that's one of the key roles that a good executive coach will play. And in that process, to help them identify what are the high leverage challenges or problems they need to solve, and then be able to be a sounding board, a strategic sounding board. I think there's a lot of different kinds of coaching, and I do think that in executive development, there also is the opportunity for being a strategic partner. It then transcends out of what a lot of coaches would consider traditional coaching, and it might get into a little bit more of that being a strategic sounding board, being an advisor to that individual, helping them think through, pointing things out that they might be missing. And as you and I were talking a little bit earlier, Nate, that there's also oftentimes with that executive some training that needs to happen. And it's best served through the coaching process. So, for example, a very simple one is that a lot of times new executives in particular, they are going to experience things that they have not experienced before in that role. So one of the areas is public communication, which could be anything from speaking to shareholders, being on an investor call, having to address a board, public speaking engagements, even being, the person tasked to announce the company at a speaking event. Until you reach a certain level, you are not the person tasked for those roles. Right. So we oftentimes are in the position of helping people prepare for those opportunities so that they shine, so that they're able to really put their best face and foot and voice forward.
Executives get promoted into roles they've never done before, right?
That's
it's
right.
Like we always use the analogy: you're playing guitar one day and you're playing the saxophone the next, or you're and while that's happening, I heard you say, as it becomes more isolating, you receive less feedback. Mm-hmm. When everything around you is the newest it's potentially been, maybe forever. You're suddenly there for years. Yeah.
I liken the metaphor I like to use, because it's a visual and people get this, is if you're on a safari, that the shift from senior leader to C-suite executive in particular. So you could be a VP amazing VP and you're going to move over into a C-suite. It's like you're driving on the safari and you are looking across and, you're in your car and you're looking across and you're seeing the giraffes and the tigers and the lions, and they're all over there and they feel incredibly close. And you think, I can walk right from where I'm at over to those animals. But you can't, because there's a huge, unseen to you, but there's a huge gap that prevents those animals from coming to you. And so making that leap, there's a leap that those animals would have to make that they can't make. That's what keeps you safe. You, the driver, you, the person in that seat. Yeah. And so if you're thinking about that, a lot of times folks look across, they're like, oh man, I want to go up to that level. I want to do that. But the reality is they can't get there the way they think. It's not a walk across the lawn. It's a big leap because they have all of these experiences they may be talented to do, and they're maybe very successful. However, they haven't done them yet. And so what we do as coaches in our firm in executive development is we get them ready for those leaps, or if they've been transported over to that other side, we make sure they don't get eaten by the lions.
Yeah. There's some serious exposure when they leave the Jeep.
That's right.
Well.
That's right.
Into new territory.
Mm-hmm.
They might be used to all sorts of other more domesticated animals, perhaps in their previous life, and now it's a whole other safari.
They are out there. They are in the jungle.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's a great metaphor. Thanks for that context. Now, so we've arrived at this balance of coaching one-on-one, of training senior leaders into C-suite roles.
Yep.
We've explored how isolating and lonely and new it can be. I read a stat on your website, let's just call it a high percentage of new executives fail.
They do.
I can sense a lot of them might get eaten when they leave the Jeep.
Yeah.
Yeah. What sense do you make of that statistic, and how are you seeing the value in lowering that? How do you lower that number?
We lower that number by helping people get ready. The number is high. First-time executives, which doesn't mean that if the executive isn't successful in a first-time role that they won't ultimately be successful. However, a lot of times they aren't. This is particularly the case for first-time CEOs because they weren't aware of that gap. They thought they were ready in all these different dimensions of leadership, but some of them they've never even been exposed to. And because at the C-suite, you have very little opportunity for failure before a company wants you out of that role and into another role, or a lot of times out of the organization, because at that level, your impact is magnified. And so there's a lot of different reasons why people aren't successful. We look at it as lack of awareness and exposure in a couple of key areas. One of them is strategic leadership. A lot of people move into those roles and they have had a pretty narrow, successful, but narrow viewpoint on the organization. They're coming in their functional expertise, and they haven't learned many of the skills necessary to form strategy at an enterprise level, to form strategy for the future. They haven't been responsible for those things. And so while they may have been excellent up to that point, it's in part because somebody has handed them the strategy and they've been good strategic operators. They've been good execution. They've been good people leaders. But now that responsibility is on them, they're not able to perform at that same high level. And then there's a whole other cascade of things that can happen in terms of insecurity, imposter syndrome, and just struggle. So that's one area, strategic leadership. Another one is organizational leadership, really understanding that you need to not only fit into the culture of an organization, but you need to build and drive the culture of the organization. And that is a huge opportunity. This happens a lot for folks who are hired in to C-suite roles from outside the organization. A lot of them do not make it because they don't understand the principle of culture and their responsibility to get with the culture and influence the culture and build the culture. And so a lot of times folks who are hired from outside the company at that high level, they can't fit quick enough. Their performance suffers because they're not fitting, and that has a whole cascade throughout the organization. So that's one of the, these are just a couple of the reasons. I mean, I could go down the line, but those are just a couple of reasons that those first-time executives are unsuccessful. Our job in executive development is to work with people in advance of those transitions to make sure that they're aware and ready and tested in the key areas of executive leadership, or if they're already in those roles, to make sure that they have the guidance and the support and the, both the flashlight and the rear view mirror so that they're going to be successful.
I was trying to fit that into your metaphor, and I felt like a senior leader is in the Jeep somewhere, maybe riding shotgun with a GPS route that's been assigned, and you get to observe and go, you're along for the ride. And yes, you're influencing.
Right.
The CEO is literally has to think like they might be driving the Jeep, or will this Jeep withstand an elephant stampede? Where are we headed? Right. All those things that the co-pilot, who's simply there to get them from point A to point B, that's been prescribed, and the GPS is already,
Yeah. That's an excellent. You just kind of put me thinking about Jumanji, but it really is. It is, a coach helps play that navigation role. Look out for this. Make a turn there. Have you thought about going down this path? Are you seeing that over there? So it really is. It is helping the executive see what's coming, navigate the right course, and be aware of kind of what they've left behind.
Yeah. There's a relatively new Leonardo DiCaprio movie where the meteor is coming to hit Earth, and they play on a lot of social issues and whatnot right now. And at the very end, don't look up. Yeah,
don't look up.
There's the guy that's kind of meant to be the Elon Musk, I think, and there's the Glenn Close acting as the fairly eccentric president, and they freeze themselves for 20,000 years, and they land on this planet, and they get out, and boom. Sorry for anyone who's about to watch this movie.
Spoiler.
So if Glenn Close there is the CEO, not expecting what's coming, the CEO needs to have the flashlight and the rearview mirror, because there's dinosaurs out there.
And it's interesting. You bring up kind of an important issue. As CEO or in the C level, so it's not just all just CEOs, it is so important to stay open and seek be authentic and vulnerable and open to not knowing everything. And the folks who are the most successful are those who are looking around for, who is my team? Who can I trust? Whether it's a coach, whether it's peers, whether it's a mentor still within or outside the organization, but maybe within the industry, it is getting the support that they need. That there is an amazing amount of grit and emotional intelligence that shines through those leaders who get into that role and know they don't have it all figured out. And it is the best advice I could give to anyone in those roles or getting into those roles is be humble. Know that you don't have all the skills that you need, but you can get them. And don't get too far over your skis. The minute you realize, hey, I might not have all of this, get the support you need either from inside or outside the organization. But the quicker you acknowledge, the quicker you get support and stay open to it, the faster you're going to accelerate towards your success.
couple things are coming up I would love to explore. A recent episode called Can Wisdom Be Taught? My wonderful guest has a new coming book called You'd Have to Be an Idiot to Want to Be a Guru.
Yeah.
And the premise is, in this kind of ancient wisdom journey, the day we can accept the fact that we know almost nothing about anything,
Mm-hmm.
it's a liberating place to lead from, because the moment we think we've got it all, that I'm hired into this position because I know everything, but oh, by the way, Kimberly just said, I'm in a role now doing stuff I've never done before, but my ego tells me I got this. I'm the CEO
Right.
now.
Yeah.
There's contradictions all over the place in what I just described.
Mhm. Yeah. A lot of paradox in those
Yeah.
in those roles. You're awarded, you've been rewarded for probably a very long career, working very hard and being successful. And here's the thing, you do have this, but not by yourself and not right away. It is very common. I hear from a lot of CEOs, like, it is the loneliest job they've ever had. The loneliest job they've ever had. Most rewarding, sometimes the most exciting, but often the loneliest. And that can exacerbate leadership issues that might be in the making. So you have to make sure that you've got a team of people around you that make it not a lonely job. And coaching is really a strong support. Personally, I think that all CEOs should have coaches, because even though you might have a really, really trusting group of people supporting you in the organization, you are still the CEO, and people will not tell you everything you need to hear.
Yeah. Gosh, it's that. And I was speaking to a client recently about the feeling of being at the top of a pyramid as that highest leader, and one step off and you're off of it. There's only room for 2 feet on there, and they're both yours.
That's right.
And you mentioned, the forgiveness of failure, the opportunity to fail is, in many ways, even though we're trying to fail forward, is small because the stakes are high.
Yeah.
And people won't tell you everything. And all these reasons that an open mind, an open heart, vulnerability, a humbleness, a coach, an unbiased thinking partner can make all the difference.
Make all the difference.
What is coming up for you in terms of, as you maybe reflect on the programs that you offer and our conversation today, as to what an existence looks like when a leader doesn't have these supports that we've been talking about? Like, where does that story go for someone?
Well, that story is a stressful story. So it might start off with a lot of energy, but where it'll get to pretty quickly is the overwhelm of, oh my gosh, there's way more to this role than I thought. And it all is important at this high level. So how do I prioritize? And how do I find out? Like, how do I get to know what I don't know? So if there isn't a resource for that, there's a lot of fumbling. A couple things that happen in the fumble. One, someone who started off feeling great and competent can very quickly become insecure. And insecure behavior going to look different on different people. But a lot of times, if all of a sudden we're like, oh shit, we have our oh shit moment, I'm over my head, I'm over my skis here. Most people, the typical response is not to reach out and be like, hey, hand raise. Hi, I'm a C-level executive and I need some help. No. That's not what happens. It is, okay, I've got to prove. I've got to show I can do this. Imposter syndrome sets in. A high degree of personal physical stress starts to brew because we're stressed. Are we getting it? Are we getting stuff done? We're not getting stuff done. Oh, I missed that. Oh, I didn't even see that. And then so when we're stressed, we start to leak our worst behaviors. So someone who might naturally be a little impatient will become very impatient. They might become someone who is terse or blunt. it doesn't take care with other people's feelings, or they might shut down. They might not be open to other people's opinions and feedback, which is actually the opposite of what they should do in both cases, right? So we're shutting down relationships, and we're shutting down the inflow of information. So under stress, the stress mechanism is pulling in so I can figure things out, but it's the opposite of what needs to happen. Staying open and welcoming is what needs to happen, but that is not what happens. So we leak our stress. Whatever our tendencies have been all of our lives in communication and in work process, the bad ones magnify whatever it is for you. For some people, it's procrastination. For some people, it's bad communication behavior. They break relationships. For some people, it is rigidity, right? They get very rigid. Whatever it is not good. And it's a result of the stress they're experiencing. And that's what happens. And that's why people ultimately fail. It looks different, but that's what happens.
And take what you just said and apply it to the reality that culture, which we talked about earlier, is defined by the worst behaviors that leaders tolerate. And so those leaked worst behaviors influence the culture. When tolerated, toxify
exactly
the culture.
Beautifully said. Nate, that was beautifully said. And that is why there's high turnover, because at some point you can't have that toxicity in your C-level.
Right.
So what happens if it's an internal promote? Sometimes they get reassigned to a special project. It pretends to be a fail up, but it's really not. And sometimes that person can recover nicely, and sometimes they can't, and they end up leaving. When it's an external hire, usually they just are terminated. The organization recognizes, I made a mistake, I need to move on. I got to cut my losses and go. All of that has a negative impact on the organization's productivity and profitability. And that is why we work so hard to make sure that folks are ready for these high-level roles.
ROI is a topic, in coaching that can be hard to quantify sometimes. The investment an organization makes in what you are describing as what you do and what you offer. Again, that negative time horizon, if we don't do this and it does get toxic and we have turnover at the C-suite level and productivity all the way down, you can't afford to not invest in people. It's just so obvious, right?
Oh, it is. And I don't have the numbers handy, but there are, I was actually reciting them in a speech I gave the other day. There are so many statistics that have measured the positive impact of coaching for leaders and the ROI gains in the organization. Those leaders that have had coaching versus those leaders that haven't had coaching, successful promotions, all of those kinds of things. There are many, many statistics about the ROI of coaching. And in my 18 years as a coach, two things I would say that prove out the value of coaching. One is my organization, and me in particular, have never not been hired twice.
Wow.
100% rehire rate with the same client, with other clients. And that to me speaks value. There's value in this service. And I can't remember the other thing I was going to say.
About the ROI and the value of coaching. It's okay. Let's hang on that one. In my previous episode, the one before this, talking with a close friend who's principal of the American School of Paris, and we talked about it's easy when it's easy. How do we react and how do we handle it when it's not? And that's when leaders really shine. We're nearing the end of our conversation. I'm wondering what you could share with our listeners when things aren't easy and those worst behaviors are leaking. How to engage in difficult conversations, and even if that's not even the right word because they're so important, and what happens if we don't deal with them? So what conversations do you have, teachings do you have about dealing with things when the leak is on, when the dam is leaking? Yeah.
So personally, I have a value of candor and kindness. Mm-hmm. So those two things, when they are put together, can be very powerful in helping surface issues and have discussions that need to be had. Mm-hmm. So sometimes a mechanism that I'll use when I notice a client in a state like that is I'll use outside feedback, whether it's a 360, a 180, a theme. I when I'm working with clients, I always am we have an agreement about candor. Again, I'm working with folks at a high level in the organization, and they don't hire me or my organization if they don't want candor, because that's kind of ground stakes, table stakes for us. And so I will surface an issue, and I'll say, hey, I've noticed a theme brewing. Do you want to talk about it? Do you want to hear about it? And they'll always say yes, because there's no way someone's going to say, nope, not today. Mm-hmm. No, they're going to be like, yeah, bring it on. And then, it's really easy, simple. Maybe easy is the emotional piece. But as a coach, this is what we're trained to do. This is what we're skilled to do. It's to serve up that experience that others are having in a way that is accessible to the individual you're coaching. And so I think a good coach is going to be eager to bring that out in the open as quickly as possible, because the more quickly it's addressed, the least damage it's going to do.
Yes. Candor is table stakes, and it's if you don't have it, those conversations, the only person that's happy about that is the person that's avoiding something, because everyone else is experiencing it, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yep. And a lot of times people, when we're in stress, I love metaphors. Yeah. So if you can see me, if you can't picture, I've got my hands up over my eyes like a racehorse. Yeah. So when we're in stress, we get our blinders on because we're coping. We're in our coping mechanism stage. And so we lose peripheral vision. So when someone is in stress, it is important for the people around them not to assume that individual knows of their impact. Their self-awareness, it naturally decreases. Mm-hmm. So when we see people with those behaviors, assume stress and help reduce their stress, and sometimes the symptoms of that stress go away.
Kimberly Gerber, where can people learn more about what you do and who you serve?
Our website is Excelerate.com, and that's spelled I, the letter I, EXCELERATE.com. And if you think about it, Excelerate, we move people forward with speed and excellence.
Thank you for your time. I've learned so much. I have pages of notes that are going to stay with me for a while. I appreciate you.
This has been fun. I appreciate you too, Nate.
Thanks for listening to Leading with Curiosity. Please share, follow, and rate the show so that other leaders can make positive change in the world. Connect with Nate at nateleslie.ca. And remember, the brain behaves very differently when encouraged to think rather than told to listen.